The hydroponics bay was leaking again. Elia's Cove stood beneath the dripping nutrient tube, watching brown liquid splatter onto his already questionable shirt, and wondered if this was rock bottom or if the universe still had a few more indignities in store for him. 3 years on this forsaken moon, and he still hadn't learned to check the pressure valves before his morning coffee substitute. "System alert," chirped VERA, his station's AI, with what Elias swore was barely concealed amusement. "Hydroponics array experiencing catastrophic failure in sections B through F." Catastrophic is a strong word for a drip, VERA. I employ precise terminology. Your tomatoes are drowning. Elias grabbed a wrench from the tool rack, its handle wrapped in electrical tape from a repair 3 months ago that he'd never quite finished. The wrench was older than most planetary governments, salvaged from a decommissioned mining operation, much like everything else in his converted research station. He'd named the place Sanctuary, which in retrospect felt embarrassingly optimistic for what amounted to a pressurized, buried in regolith at the ass end of map space. The valve surrendered after minimal persuasion, which meant something else was probably about to break. That was the rule out here. Fix one thing, break another. The universe maintained its balance. "Message incoming," VERA announced. "Delete it." It's the third notice from the Galactic Archaeological Society regarding your membership dues. Especially delete that one. They're threatening to revoke your credentials. Elias wiped nutrient solution from his beard, examining the brownish stain it left on his fingers. "VERA, my credentials were revoked the day they called me a fraud in front of the entire academic community. The membership dues thing is just them being petty. Technically, the board voted to suspend your fellowship pending further review." Which is academic speak for "we think you're a liar but we're too polite to say it outright." He moved to the next valve, checking the pressure gauge. Normal. Of course it was normal. The hydroponic system had achieved sentience purely to spite him. Besides, who needs credentials when you're growing mutant tomatoes on a moon that doesn't officially exist? This moon exists. It's simply not economically viable for colonization, and therefore omitted from standard navigation charts. You say omitted, I say forgot. Potato, potato. I've explained previously that potatoes and tomatoes are taxonomically distinct despite both being nightshades. Elias had stopped trying to figure out if VRA's literalism was a programming quirk or deliberate sass. He'd inherited her from the previous tenant, a mining surveyor who'd abandoned the station after finding nothing worth extracting. The AI had apparently decided that if she was stuck here, she might as well make his life interesting. The view from the observation window made up for the leaking pipes and the loneliness, though Elias would never admit the loneliness part. His moon orbited a gas giant striped in amber and violet, a swirling storm larger than Earth raging in its southern hemisphere for centuries. Beyond it, the nebula known as Tarante's Veil painted the black with threads of crimson and gold. No colonies, no shipping lanes, no tenure committees waiting to dissect his every finding. Paradise, really, if you ignored the soul-crushing isolation. He'd been Dr. Elias Cove once, the youngest xenoarchaeologist to decrypt a complete first civilization site. The academic world had celebrated him for exactly 8 months before that same world decided his greatest discovery was too convenient, too profound, too perfectly aligned with ancient myths to be real. They'd accused him of fabrication, of planting evidence, of being so desperate for glory that he'd betrayed the very foundations of scientific integrity. The irony was that he'd been absolutely certain of his findings. The translation matrices didn't lie. The carbon dating was impeccable. The artifacts sang with authenticity to anyone willing to listen. But the Galactic Archaeological Society wanted proof that fit their existing models, and Elias' first civilization didn't fit anybody's model. It suggested impossible things, technologies that violated accepted physics, a civilization that hadn't just fallen but had chosen to disappear, leaving behind breadcrumbs for anyone smart enough to follow. So they'd buried him instead of his evidence. Perimeter alert, Vera said, her tone shifting to something almost concerned. Elias looked up from the valve. What kind of alert? Atmospheric entry detected. Single craft, descending rapidly toward our coordinates. His stomach tightened. In 3 years, nobody had visited. Nobody even knew he was here except for the supply drone that appeared quarterly with protein paste and recalcitrant hydroponics parts. Pirates, negative. Energy signature is unlike any vessel in my database. Configuration suggests extreme technological sophistication. That's somehow worse than pirates. Elias dropped the wrench and moved to the main console, pulling up external sensors. The display showed a contact burning through the thin atmosphere, decelerating in ways that should have torn any ship apart. Vera, that's impossible. Those G-forces would liquefy a pilot. Yet the craft maintained structural integrity. The vessel resolved on screen as it dropped below cloud cover, if you could call the wispy methane haze clouds. It was beautiful in the way ancient things sometimes were, all flowing curves and metal that seemed to shift between silver and bronze depending on the light. No visible engines, no exhaust plumes, just graceful descent as if gravity was a polite suggestion rather than a law. It landed 300 meters from his station, settling onto the rust-colored regolith without leaving so much as a scorch mark. Elias stared at the screen. Analysis. Hull composition unknown. Power source unknown. Method of propulsion unknown. I can continue listing unknowns if you find it therapeutic. Skip to what you do know. Someone is exiting the vessel. The figure that emerged wore armor that flowed like liquid mercury, catching the amber light from the gas giant above. Even at this distance, even through the grainy feed from his external cameras, Elias could see she moved with absolute confidence, each step deliberate, purposeful. She carried no visible weapons, but everything about her posture suggested she didn't need any. She was walking toward his station. Vera security protocols. Our security consists of one exterior door with a lock that sticks and your winning personality. Not helping. I've activated the external speaker. You can communicate without opening the door. The figure stopped 10 meters from the entrance, standing perfectly still, waiting. When she looked up at the camera, Elias felt something shift in his chest, some recognition he couldn't name. Her face was striking in ways that made classical beauty seem boring, all sharp angles and fierce eyes, framed by hair that moved in the thin wind like living shadow. And her ears, rising to elegant points that marked her as decidedly not human. She spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the speaker system. Dr. Elias Cove, I've traveled very far to find you. My name is Kivaris of the Thyrian Ascendancy, and I need your help to prevent a war that will consume the galaxy. She paused, and despite the gravity of her words, something almost like humor touched her expression. Also, your hydroponics bay is leaking. I can see it from here. Elias looked down at his nutrient-stained shirt, then back at the screen showing the most legendary warrior in known space standing at his door. Vera. Yes, Dr. Cove. I think the universe just found another indignity. Elias had imagined many scenarios for how his exile might end. Rescue by apologetic colleagues, perhaps. A slow fade into obscurity punctuated by excellent tomatoes. Maybe even a dramatic death involving a meteor strike, which would at least make for an interesting footnote in xenoarchaeological history. What he had not imagined was serving instant coffee to the most dangerous woman in 17 star systems, while she sat on his only chair that didn't wobble. Kivaris held the cup between both hands, studying the brown liquid with the kind of intense focus usually reserved for disarming explosives. This beverage is an affront to several biological imperatives. It's coffee. Well, coffee adjacent. The supply drone isn't big on variety. She took a careful sip, and her expression suggested she just tasted evidence of war crimes. Your people consume this voluntarily. My people conquered 3 planets running on this stuff. It's basically our superpower. Elias leaned against the console, arms crossed, trying to project a confidence he absolutely did not feel. The legendary Kivaris of Thyria was sitting in his station, her armor now retracted to reveal clothes that probably cost more than his entire education, and she was grimacing at his coffee. The cognitive dissonance was spectacular. "I've read about your superpower," she said, setting the cup down with finality. "Your species also invented something called reality television, so perhaps conquering planets while caffeinated isn't the achievement you believe it to be. You came here to insult humanity's cultural contributions. I came here because you're the only person in the galaxy who can read this." She reached into a satchel at her hip and withdrew a crystalline tablet no larger than her palm. The moment it left the bag, Elias felt his breath catch. The crystal pulsed with soft blue light, and etched across its surface were symbols he'd spent 8 months of his life decoding before his career imploded. He pushed off from the console, taking an involuntary step forward. "That's first civilization scripture, original material, not a reproduction. Where did you find this?" "My people have guarded it for 6 generations. It was recovered from a derelict station in the outer void, along with several other artifacts we couldn't translate. Every linguist, every cryptographer, every AI system we consulted produced nothing useful." She held the tablet up to the light, and the symbols seemed to dance beneath the surface. "Then I read your published papers, the ones the Galactic Archaeological Society declared fraudulent." "They weren't fraudulent. I know, because these symbols match your translations exactly." Elias felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, vindication, sharp and sweet and slightly terrifying. "You're saying I was right." "I'm saying your colleagues were idiots, but that's hardly newsworthy." Kivaris stood, and even in the cramped confines of his station she managed to move with fluid grace. She handed him the tablet. "Read it." The crystal was warm against his palms, almost alive. The symbols swam into focus, and Elias felt his mind slip into the old patterns, the linguistic frameworks he'd developed in isolation, and then defended to a hostile committee who decided his genius was actually delusion. The first civilization had used a language that operated on multiple dimensional axes, meaning and sound and mathematical probability, all encoded in the same glyphs. "It's a map," he murmured, tracing one symbol with his fingertip. "Coordinates to something called the resonance engine. There are warnings here too. Whoever finds this device can reshape fundamental forces across vast distances. Gravity, time, electromagnetic fields, it's..." He looked up at her, struggling to process the implications. "This is either the greatest discovery in galactic history or the most dangerous weapon ever conceived." "It's both, and 7 different factions are currently hunting for it. Let me guess, you want to find it first. I want to ensure it never falls into the wrong hands. My people, the Thyrian Ascendancy, have resources and the military strength to protect it. But we need to locate it before the Kresh Dominion does, or the Veiled Synod, or any of the others who would use it to wage war." She moved to his observation window, gazing out at the gas giant. "You know what they call me in the outer territories, the undefeated princess, heir to the Crimson Throne, commander of the fleet that broke the siege of Talavar. I've won 43 engagements without a single loss. Congratulations." She turned, and there was something tired in her eyes beneath the warrior's mask. "I've won 43 battles because I'm very good at killing people who need killing. But this isn't something that can be solved with tactics and firepower. This requires expertise I don't have. It requires someone who understands the first civilization better than anyone alive. I'm a disgraced academic living in a tin can." "You're a disgraced academic who was right when everyone else was wrong. There's a difference." Elias set the tablet down on his workbench, careful despite his shaking hands. "Why should I help you? I left that world behind." I'm done being paraded around as either a genius or a fraud, depending on which way the political winds blow. Because if you don't help me, someone else will find the resonance engine. And when they do, they'll use it to rewrite the galaxy according to their vision. Billions will die in the conflicts that follow. Entire civilizations will be erased or enslaved. She stepped closer, and he could see the slight points of her ears, the only feature that marked her as other than human. You became an archaeologist because you wanted to understand the past. Here's your chance to ensure there's a future worth understanding. That's a hell of a sales pitch. I've been practicing. The journey here took 3 weeks, and I had time to consider how to convince a hermit that the galaxy needs him. What if I say no? Kivaris smiled, and it was the kind of smile that probably preceded several of those 43 victories. Then, I sit in your station drinking that vile beverage until you change your mind. I'm very patient when I need to be. Vera, Elias called out, what do you think? The AI's voice carried a note of what might have been excitement. I think your tomatoes are dying anyway, and this sounds significantly more interesting than monitoring hydroponics failures. Traitor, I prefer the term pragmatist. Kivaris picked up the tablet again, holding it out to him. I need an answer, Dr. Cove. Will you help me save the galaxy, or are you content to let it burn while you hide from your past? Elias looked at the crystal, at the symbols that had cost him everything, at the woman who'd crossed the void to ask for his help. He thought about his leaking hydroponics bay, his mutant tomatoes, his 3 years of self-imposed exile pretending he didn't care about the work that had once defined him. He thought about being right, about vindication, about the possibility that maybe his disgrace had been leading to this moment all along. Your ship better have decent coffee, he said finally. Kivaris's smile widened. It has coffee that won't make you question your will to live. Then I'm in. But if this resonance engine turns out to be another career-ending disaster, I'm blaming you. Fair enough. Though if we fail, career concerns will be the least of our problems. Reassuring. She moved toward the door, then paused. Pack light, we leave in 1 hour. After she'd gone, Elias stood in his station, surrounded by 3 years of accumulated isolation, wondering if he just made the best decision of his life or the last one. Vera's voice broke the silence. Dr. Cove. Yeah, for what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. You're an AI, you don't have feelings about choices. True, but I've run the probability matrices, and staying here results in death by boredom with 99% certainty. The other option offers at least a 12% chance of success. 12%. I'm an optimist. Elias laughed despite himself and went to pack his life into a single bag, leaving his sanctuary behind for a galaxy that had once rejected him and now, apparently, needed him to save it. The interior of Kivaris's ship made Elias reconsider every life choice that had led him to living in a converted mining station. The corridors were wide enough to drive a small vehicle through, the walls composed of that same shifting metal that seemed to be alive, and the ambient lighting adjusted automatically to a perfect spectrum that made even his 3-day-old beard look almost dignified. He'd walked past what appeared to be an actual meditation garden, complete with bonsai trees that definitely shouldn't exist in zero gravity, and a galley that could have serviced a restaurant on any civilized world. This is a warship, he asked, trailing behind Kivaris as she led him deeper into the vessel. This is my flagship, the 7th Dawn. She's seen combat in every major engagement for the past decade. Your flagship has better interior design than most luxury hotels. Why should functionality preclude beauty? Humans have such strange ideas about military aesthetics. She palmed a door open, revealing what he assumed was the command center. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing star charts and tactical data in languages he didn't recognize. 3 crew members worked at various stations, each wearing armor similar to Kivaris's but in different configurations. They glanced up as she entered, then immediately returned to their tasks with the practiced efficiency of people who knew better than to interrupt. One of them, a wiry man with the same elongated ears as Kivaris, looked up again and did a double take at Elias. "Princess, you actually convinced the hermit to join us. Commander Thale, meet Dr. Elias Cove. Doctor, this is my second in command, who will now apologize for calling you a hermit." "No apology necessary," Elias said. "I am a hermit was a hermit. The tense is confusing." Thale grinned. "I like him already. Does he know about the part where we're probably all going to die?" "I mentioned it might be dangerous." "You mentioned preventing a galactic war," Elias corrected. "You were light on the personal mortality details." "Would it have changed your answer?" He thought about his leaking hydroponics bay. "Probably not, but I would have appreciated the full picture." Kivaris moved to the central display, expanding one of the star charts with a gesture. "We're currently in the Margent cluster, 12 days from the first coordinates on the tablet. The region is technically neutral territory, but that's a polite fiction. At least 3 different powers maintain a presence there, all pretending they're conducting scientific research while actually watching each other for any sign of advantage." "That sounds cozy." "The coordinates point to a dead world orbiting a dying star. According to our preliminary scans, the planet was once inhabited by a civilization that matches the technological profile of your first civilization. Then approximately 4,000 years ago, something happened. The entire population vanished within a solar month. No bodies, no signs of conflict, just empty cities and abandoned infrastructure." Elias leaned closer to the display, studying the planetary data. The world was cold now, its atmosphere thin, its oceans evaporated into ice caps at the poles. But the topographical scans showed structures, vast complexes that spiraled across the surface in geometric patterns that made his archaeologist's heart race. 4,000 years is recent on the first civilization timeline. Most of their sites are 10 times that age. This could be one of their final outposts before the disappearance, which means it might contain information about why they vanished, or how to follow them. A new voice spoke from one of the side stations, belonging to a young woman whose armor bore technical insignias. "Jump calculations complete, Princess. We can enter hyperspace on your command. Proceed, Engineer Solis. Standard emergence protocols." The ship thrummed with sudden energy, a deep vibration that Elias felt in his bones. The view screen showed the starfield beginning to distort, light stretching into lines of probability as the seventh dawn prepared to punch through normal space into the higher dimensions where faster-than-light travel became possible. "You might want to hold on to something," Thale offered helpfully. "First-timers sometimes have trouble with the transition. I've done hyperspace before. Not in a Thyrian vessel, you haven't." The universe folded. That was the only way Elias could describe it. One moment they were in normal space, the next they were everywhere and nowhere, existing in a state of quantum superposition that made his stomach rebel and his vision blur. Colors that had no name bled through the view screen, and he could swear he heard music in a register that shouldn't be audible to human ears. Then it snapped back, and they were in hyperspace proper, traveling faster than light through a dimension that resembled a fever dream painted by an abstract artist with a grudge against geometry. Elias steadied himself against a console, trying not to vomit. That was different. Thyrian hyperdrives operate on principles your scientists haven't discovered yet. We fold space rather than piercing it. More efficient, but the transition can be disorienting. Kivaris seemed completely unaffected, as did her crew. "You'll adapt after a few jumps." "How many jumps are we talking about?" "To reach the coordinates." 7, spread across 12 days. Plus whatever maneuvering we need to avoid the various parties who will definitely notice a Thyrian flagship entering neutral space. "The Kresh Dominion has 2 cruisers in the region," Solis reported. "The Veiled Synod maintains a monitoring station at the edge of the system, and there are rumors of Corsair activity, though nothing confirmed." "Corsairs?" Elias asked, Pirates with delusions of legitimacy, Thale explained. They operate in the neutral zones, raiding whoever looks profitable and selling their services to whoever pays the most. Dangerous but predictable. It's the creche that worry me. If they suspect we're looking for first civilization technology, they'll throw everything they have at us. Kivaris dismissed the tactical display with a wave. We'll deal with complications as they arise. Right now, I want Dr. Cove to examine the other artifacts we've recovered. There may be additional information that will help us understand what we're walking into. She led him to an adjoining chamber that had been converted into something between a laboratory and a museum. Artifacts filled transparent cases along the walls, each one carefully labeled and preserved. Elias recognized some of the designs from his own research, but others were completely new. Crystalline formations that pulsed with inner light. Metal fragments covered in the same multidimensional script. A sphere that seemed to contain a miniature star system, planets orbiting in perfect mathematical harmony. This collection is worth more than most planetary economies, he breathed. This collection nearly started 3 wars. The Creche tried to steal half of it, the Synod claimed divine ownership, and a human corporate consortium attempted to buy it through entirely illegal means. She opened one of the cases, carefully removing a tablet similar to the one she'd shown him earlier. We've kept these secret for 6 generations, waiting for someone who could translate them. My great-grandmother was the one who first proposed that the first civilization might have left instructions for finding them. She spent her entire life searching for a translator. Why not just hire human linguists? Because we couldn't risk the information leaking, and because most human institutions are more interested in politics than truth, as you discovered. She handed him the tablet. Read what you can. We have 12 days before we arrive, and I want to know everything these artifacts can tell us about what we'll find. Elias took the crystal, feeling its warmth spread through his fingers. The symbols were different from the first tablet, but the underlying structure was the same. It would take time to decode, time to cross-reference, time to build the linguistic framework that would unlock their secrets. But he had time now. He had resources. He had a purpose beyond maintaining doomed tomatoes. There's one more thing, Kivaris said quietly. These artifacts have a peculiar property. The more you work with them, the more you'll experience what we call resonance. Dreams, visions, moments where you know things you shouldn't. My researchers theorized it's some kind of psychic imprint left by the first civilization. It's harmless, but it can be unsettling. You're telling me these tablets are haunted. I'm telling you they remember, and they want to be understood. Elias looked at the collection of alien artifacts, at the fragments of a civilization that had vanished into mystery, and felt the old familiar thrill of discovery mixed with new fear of what he might discover. 12 days to decode thousands of years of secrets. No pressure. Kivaris smiled. You're the expert who was right when everyone else was wrong. If anyone can do this, it's you. Flattery won't make the translation go faster. No, but the coffee in the galley might help. I told you it was better than yours. She left him alone with the artifacts and their patient, ancient secrets, while the 7th dawn carried them all toward a dead world, and whatever truths waited in its ruins. The chamber beneath the dead world's surface had been waiting for 4,000 years, and it greeted them with lights that flickered to life, the moment Elias crossed the threshold. Kivaris stood beside him, her weapon drawn despite the lack of any obvious threat, while Thale and 2 other soldiers maintained a perimeter behind them. The walls were covered in the same flowing script Elias had spent 12 days decoding, but here the symbols moved, rearranging themselves as if responding to their presence. This is either incredibly exciting or we're about to die, Elias said, his voice echoing in the vast space. Why not both? Thale offered cheerfully from the entrance. The chamber was circular, easily 100 meters across, with a crystalline platform at its center. Above the platform, suspended in defiance of gravity, hung a sphere of pure darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Elias felt his skin prickle just looking at it, some primal part of his brain screaming that the sphere was wrong in ways that violated fundamental laws of reality. "That's not the resonance engine," Kivara said, her tactical instincts clearly battling with curiosity. "The readings don't match what the tablets described." "Because it's not the engine, it's a test." Elias moved closer, reading the symbols as they shifted. The first civilization didn't just hide their technology. They wanted to ensure whoever found it was worthy of the responsibility. "This is a gatekeeper." As if responding to his words, the darkness coalesced into a form, humanoid but not quite human, with features that suggested every intelligent species, and none of them simultaneously. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, in a language that somehow Elias understood perfectly despite never having heard it before. "Seekers of the lost knowledge, you stand at the threshold of understanding. The resonance engine exists, sleeping in a place between spaces, waiting for those who prove themselves ready. But to wake it is to announce its location to all who watch the stars. War will follow, suffering will spread. Powers will clash over technology they cannot comprehend." "That's a hell of a warning label," Elias muttered. The entity shifted, regarding him with eyes that held galaxies. "You may seal the path forever, denying all access to the engine and preserving the peace of ignorance. Or you may accept the burden of the key, bonding with a fragment of the engine's power, becoming the living bridge to its location. But know this, such a bond will change you irrevocably. Your life will be tied to the engine's fate, and when the time comes, you alone will decide who may access its power." Kivara stepped forward. "What happens if we do nothing? If we walk away? Others will come. The Creche, the Synod, the Corsairs, the countless factions who hunt these ruins. One will eventually solve the riddle. One will claim the engine without wisdom, without restraint. The galaxy will burn in the fires of their ambition. So our choices are start a war now or let someone else start it later. Fantastic options." The entity's attention turned to Kivaris, and Elias saw her stiffen under its gaze. "Princess of the Thyrian Ascendancy, warrior of 43 victories, you came seeking power to prevent war. But you know the truth your people hide. Your ascendancy would wield the engine as a weapon, claiming noble purpose while crushing all opposition. You would become the very threat you fear." "That's not true," Kivara said, but her voice carried uncertainty. "Isn't it? Your great-grandmother sought this power to expand the ascendancy. Your father seeks it to cement his dynasty. You tell yourself you're different, but you're still a warrior who believes problems can be solved through superior force." The entity shifted again, becoming something that might have been sympathetic. "You're not wrong to fear what others might do, but you're naive to think your people would be any better." Elias watched Kivara struggle with the accusation, saw the doubt warring with conviction in her expression. In 12 days aboard the 7th Dawn, he'd learned to read her moods, learned that beneath the warrior's confidence lay genuine fear about the burden she carried. She'd been raised to lead, to conquer, to believe in the righteousness of Thyrian supremacy. Facing the possibility that her cause was just another flavor of tyranny clearly wasn't easy. "So what do you suggest?" she asked finally. "We seal it away and hope nobody else finds it. I suggest you trust someone who has no faction, no agenda, no government to serve." The entity turned back to Elias, the disgraced academic who seeks only truth, the hermit who abandoned power rather than abuse it. "You, Dr. Cove, are uniquely qualified to bear this burden because you've already proven you value integrity over ambition." "Oh no," Elias said immediately. "Absolutely not. I'm not hero material. I lived on a moon growing mutant tomatoes specifically to avoid this kind of responsibility. Yet you're here. You could have refused the princess. You could have remained in exile. Instead, you risked everything for the truth. I risked everything because I was vindicated and slightly bored. That's not the same as being qualified to guard a galaxy-destroying weapon. Kivaris holstered her weapon, turning to face him fully. The entity is right. You're the only one here who doesn't have a larger agenda. I came here planning to claim the engine for my people, believing we could be trusted with that power. But I've spent the past 12 days watching you work, watching you obsess over accuracy and truth rather than advantage. You decoded those tablets not to gain power, but because you needed to understand them. That's the difference between us. So your solution is to dump cosmic responsibility on someone who explicitly doesn't want it. My solution is to trust you to make the right choice when the time comes. If you become the key, you can prevent anyone from accessing the engine until you're certain they deserve it, including my people, including me. Elias looked at the entity, at Kivaris, at the chamber full of ancient warnings and impossible choices. He thought about his exile, about the career he'd lost because he valued truth over political convenience, about 3 years of hiding from a galaxy that had betrayed him. He thought about the 12% chance of success VERA had calculated and how that seemed wildly optimistic now. If I do this, I'm not serving any faction, not Thyria, not humanity, not anyone. I make the decisions about who accesses this power, and nobody overrules me. Agreed, Kivaris said without hesitation. And when this is over, assuming we survive, you help me clear my name. Full academic reinstatement, public acknowledgement that I was right all along, the works. I'll testify before the Galactic Archaeological Society myself. I'll make them beg for your forgiveness. Okay then. Elias turned to the entity. I accept. Make me your key or guardian or whatever cosmic job title comes with this responsibility. But I want it on record that I'm doing this under protest and with significant reservations about my own judgment. The entity that wasn't quite a ghost reached out with a hand that wasn't quite solid, touching Elias' forehead. Reality fractured. He felt the engine suddenly, not as a distant object but as an extension of himself, sleeping in a dimension humans had no words for, waiting for his call. Information flooded his mind, knowledge about how the first civilization had built it, why they'd hidden it, what they'd hoped future generations might learn from their mistake. They'd created ultimate power and realized too late that ultimate power corrupts ultimately. So they'd scattered, disappeared, left behind only puzzles and warnings for those who came after. When the world snapped back into focus, Elias was on his knees, Kivaris holding him upright while Thale shouted something about medical assistance. The entity was gone. The chamber was just stone and crystal again, ancient and empty. Are you alive? Kivaris asked, her usual composure cracked with genuine concern. Define alive. I feel like I've been turned inside out and reassembled by someone who only vaguely remembers human anatomy. But you can feel it, the engine. He could. It was there in the back of his mind, a presence both massive and patient, waiting for him to call it, to unlock its location, to give someone access to power that could reshape reality. The weight of that responsibility settled on him like gravity. Yeah, I can feel it, and I hate everything about this. She helped him stand, and he realized she was smiling despite the tears on her face. You just saved the galaxy by agreeing to be its most reluctant guardian. That deserves recognition. I'll settle for that coffee you promised, and maybe a significant raise in my academic standing. Behind them, the chamber began to collapse, stone grinding against stone as the first civilization's final test dissolved into ruins. They ran, Thale and the soldiers covering their retreat, while ancient mechanisms reclaimed the space that had served its purpose. By the time they reached the surface, the entrance had sealed completely, leaving no evidence that anything had ever been there. Aboard the Seventh Dawn, Elias sat in the observation deck, watching the dead world recede as they prepared to jump back to civilized space. Kivaris joined him, 2 cups of actually decent coffee in her hands. The creche detected our presence. They're sending inquiries about what we found. Tell them we found nothing. Just another dead world full of disappointment. And when they don't believe me, then I'll convince them personally. Turns out being the living key to ultimate power comes with certain persuasive abilities. I can feel when someone's lying about their intentions regarding the engine. It's going to make cocktail parties really awkward. She laughed, genuine and unguarded. What will you do now? Return to your moon? Are you kidding? I've got academic vindication to collect and a universe full of first civilization sites to explore properly this time. Plus, someone needs to write the definitive text on why ancient superweapons are terrible ideas. Might as well be the guy bonded to one. He sipped his coffee, savoring the fact that it didn't taste like regret and chemical warfare. What about you? Will your people accept that you didn't bring back the engine? They'll have to. I'll tell them the truth, that I found something more valuable than a weapon. I found someone who can be trusted with the choice of how and when that weapon should ever be used. She raised her cup in a toast, to reluctant guardians and disgraced academics, to warrior princesses who know when not to fight. They touched cups, two people from different worlds who'd stumbled into preventing an apocalypse through the radical act of trusting each other. Outside, the stars beckoned with their infinite mysteries, and somewhere in a dimension beyond normal space, the resonance engine slept, waiting for a summons that might never come. And Elias, former hermit and current cosmic guardian, decided that was exactly as it should be.